BBC4 Collections, specially chosen programmes from the BBC archive. For this collection, Sir Michael Parkinson has selected BBC interviews with influential figures of the 20th century. More programmes on this theme and other BBC4 collections are available on BBC iPlayer.
Money is secondary. Nobody makes money unless they run a mint. One of the companies that I'm heavily interested in owes over $300 million. There are crackpots in England. I like the company of women. Most millionaires that I've known are very hard-working men. I like to think I'm average.
The richest man in the world rules an empire alone. To most of us, big money means the £75,000 prize on the treble chance. To be as rich as this man, you'd need to win the pools every Saturday for 800 years. He could afford to give a pound note to every man, woman and child in the world, and that includes the Chinese. He could pay this year's income tax for everyone in Britain. He could spend £275,000 every day until he's 100 and still have a bit put by. His personal fortune's been estimated at £400 million. His assets at more than 3,000 million. Last year, his income from just 3 of his companies was around £34,000 a day. He earns more each day than the average man earns in a lifetime. He's several times richer than the gold reserves of the Sterling area. His real wealth is incalculable. J. Paul Getty is unique. He's the only American dollar billionaire. $1 billion is more than £357 million. Only the legendary rulers of Kuwait and Saudi Arabia can compare financially with this private citizen who becomes more of an exception every day. For he is an absolute monarch. No man tells him what to do. No group of directors, no shareholders influence his lonely decisions. Getty is a one-man international power. 70 companies, 19,000 employees. His private empire of refineries and tankers and immense oil reserves submerged in a complex corporate tangle and held firmly under his own strong thumb. For no one puts the pressure on the largest independent oil producer in the world. Around the globe, the Getty oil wells gush. 80,000 barrels a day from the neutral zone of Arabia, more from Iran and Canada. In the United States, wherever oil's produced, there he is. Along the Pacific coast and in the Rocky Mountains, North Dakota and Wyoming, New Mexico and Texas and Mississippi. One company alone owns 6,000 oil wells. His liquid wealth carried around the world by the Getty fleet, by 29 giant tankers just built in France and Japan, and plying between the oil fields and refineries near Naples in Italy, at Mizushima and Kawasaki in Japan, at Wilmington, Delaware, in California and Kansas, Texas and Colorado. Across the American continent, 10,000 service stations sell the petrol they produce. Mr. Getty controls office blocks and hotels in New York, at Acapulco, Mexico, Tulsa, Oklahoma, Los Angeles. Then there's an aircraft corporation and his insurance, life assurance and finance companies. This, then, is the realm of J. Paul Getty. A complex kingdom, ruled not from some skyscraping concrete tower in Manhattan, an exotic potentate's palace in Arabia, or a bustling building in Beirut, but from here. From a rambling 16th century country house in 700 acres of Surrey, linked to the outside world by just 2 telephone lines through the Guildford Exchange. The whole improbable empire of Mr. Getty is controlled from this country seat of power, where he moved in the summer of 1960 after living in modest hotel suites in Paris and London. And though he talks of returning to California, here it seems he'll stay. For though the Getty empire may be far-flung, its founder's not much of a traveller. He won't fly, since he was caught in a tornado 20 years ago, and he's fearful of the sea, which makes getting back to the United States something of a problem, and helps to explain why his nightly telephone bill can be £140. The rich, it's been said, are different from the rest of us. They have more money. But of course, there's much more to it. Everything about multimillionaires is so contrary to our ordinary experience that they're remote and mysterious as beings from another planet. They don't seem to belong to our human race. Few of us would be what we are today if we could afford to be different. And everyone's reaction, your reaction, to great wealth is self-revealing. For some, the mere existence of the very rich is an offense. For others, the only thing wrong with them is that their unlimited pleasures can't be shared. But in reality, of course, even multimillionaires soon reach the limits to the purely personal gratification great wealth can buy. They can only eat so much food, however exotic, only live in one house at a time, however splendid, only sleep in one bed, use one bath, wear one suit. To this modest man, such enforced restraint comes naturally. This is his counting house, with just 2 young secretaries to help him. There's no telex, no ticker tape, no high pressure.
Was that international? Oh, yes, just a minute. I'll see if Mr. Getty's available. Will you hold on?
In a pleasant, unassuming study, with an ordinary desk and an ordinary clutter, Mr. Getty proceeds calmly and purposefully towards his second billion.
I think we might as well wait a while. I don't think we have enough data yet to do anything definite now. I think it'll be about next month before we have the data. Yes. Yes, it's being processed in Texas. All right. Thank you. Goodbye.
Mr. Getty always knows exactly what his empire is about, and he's probably the only man who does, for his fortune remains as baffling and enigmatic as his private life. Like an iceberg, the vital mass is submerged from sight. But on the surface, there's the Getty Oil Company, with 9 consolidated companies. Profits last year conservatively estimated after taxes at £5,700,000. Mr. Getty owns 80% of this company and elects all the directors. So, £4,600,000 to Mr. Getty. Tidewater Oil Company, with 30 corporate subsidiaries across 82 countries. Profits after taxes, £10,700,000. 46%, or another £5 million, to Mr. Getty. Skelly Oil, with 20 subsidiaries, profits after taxes £9 million, and 30%, or £2,700,000, to Mr. Getty. So, with incidental salaries, he's earning, for a regulation working day, about £4,000 an hour. His income, or as his accountants prefer to say, his increase in wealth, was around £12.5 million. His income for a month would pay the salaries of the Prime Minister, the Cabinet, and all the 627 MPs at Westminster for a year. But alongside his countless assets, this income is relatively modest, for his money remains within the business. It's in the books, he says, not in the bank. And as he doesn't draw it out, he doesn't pay tax on it. It's safe from the inland revenue, from predatory international taxmen who've made it all but impossible for anyone, ever again, to accumulate the incredible wealth of a Getty, of a billionaire who's still unsure why he's succeeded when others have failed.
I've sometimes thought about that, and I really don't know of any quality I have that many others don't have. I'm hardworking, I like to think, but I know others just as hardworking. I'm intelligent, I like to think. I know others just as intelligent or more intelligent. I'm imaginative, I like to think. I have many friends and acquaintances that are just as imaginative or more imaginative. I always wish that I had a better personality, that could entertain people better, was a better conversationalist. Always worried I might be a little on the dull side as a companion. And always felt that although I've nearly always tried to do my best, when I've reviewed my efforts, I've nearly always seen that I could have done better and should have done better.
So how is it then that you've come out so very much on top?
The difference between a successful businessman and one possibly not so successful is that maybe 37 different qualities are required for a great success, and a man has 35 of those qualities, he makes a more modest success. But just what those two missing qualities might be, I don't know.
Did you set out to become the richest man in the world?
No, I never had any interest in acquiring.
How did it happen then?
Well, I suppose it happened because my father had built up a very substantial business, flourishing business. I was the only child, and I had to carry on the business.
Yet if your bank balance is any scorecard, you're 1,000 times more successful.
Well, I started pretty high altitude, you might say, and he started at sea level, so that's...
You obviously must be a calculating man, but to have such success in business, do you not also need to be something of a gambler?
Well, I suppose it depends on how you define gambler. Gambling is risk-taking. It might be said that the owner of a casino gambles, he takes risks, but he has the odds in his favor. In other words, it's intelligent gambling. Now, to gamble against a casino, I would call unintelligent gambling, and I've never tried to devote my time to unintelligent risk-taking. I think it's difficult enough to take risks intelligently, and when you know the odds are against you, I don't see the point of it.
So if you wanted to gamble...
I'd buy a casino.
You've written a series of articles, Mr. Getty, about success in business, and they've appeared in what the Americans call a girly magazine, full of nudes and a sort of sophistication. What made you choose this curious shop window?
Well, because everybody seems to read it, and it's especially read by young businessmen. And I wanted to get the message over to them rather than to people in my own age bracket.
What was the message?
Well, about the importance of having an independent view on things, not being influenced by what everybody else says. If I'd been influenced by what everybody else said in the 30s, I never had bought any shares in the 30s. The shares I had, I would have sold. Shares were $6 in 1935, and today they're about $300.
And today, Mr. Getty, what are you doing today?
Well, I'm still buying.
Are there any other billionaires on the horizon coming towards the top? Or do you think that the heroic age of the billionaire is almost over, that you're the last of the line?
I don't suppose so. I think that others in the future probably do much more than I've ever done.
Up to now, of course, no one's done more than Mr. Getty's done, and only the ruler of Kuwait and the king of Saudi Arabia, who've also come up in the world through the oil business, have done as well. When the three richest men met in the desert, the sheikhs learned with surprise that, in more ways than one, Mr. Getty from Minneapolis could speak their language. He'd learned Arabic from gramophone records. Mr. Getty is a thorough man, though not, as sometimes appears, infallible. Here he was returning to the scene of the biggest mistake of his business life. In 1931, when the East Texas field came in and Texas oil went down to 10 cents a barrel, he pulled out of the Middle East. Had he stayed on, today he'd have been even richer. 30 years later, and rich enough, he meets the two sheikhs who were born upon and never left this oil-rich desert. Mr. Getty, who bought his way back beside them, was born in Minnesota just over 70 years ago. His ancestors on his father's side were Irish, from Londonderry. His mother was half Scots, half Dutch. Like the sheikhs, he was never poor. Those well-publicized barefooted boys who tread the road from selling newspapers to owning millions are rapidly becoming an extinct species like the buffalo. Young Paul was just another American boy.
February 17th, 1904. Fine day. In the evening, Papa gave me a whipping for saying he was a doggone fool and that the chambermaid had better go soak her head in Gyp's mouth. March 15th. Harry came up and we rolled for marbles. I now have 275. In the evening, I read a book called In Times of Peril by G.A. Henty.
His father had started from poverty, but in 1903 bought the lease to 1,100 acres of Oklahoma Indian Territory for £200 and struck oil. When he died at the age of 74, he was worth £5 million. A Methodist and a more religious man than his only son, he left Paul less than £200,000, mainly because he was displeased that he'd already been married and divorced. However, receiving only 1/30th of his father's fortune didn't matter much by then, for young Getty had made his first $1 million 13 years earlier at the age of 24. In those days, the man who was to become richer than anyone else had other thoughts than business. He turned with concentration to marriage. But with wife number 1, wife number 2, wife number 3, wife number 4, wife number 5, it never quite seemed to work out. Though whenever he was single, Paul Getty remained a very social man. Today there are 4 sons in his business and 7 grandchildren. One day they'll inherit a private empire such as the world has never known, and all the responsibilities of a man who, now and then, must wish he still had only the gentle money worries of once upon a time.
Monday, June 20th, 1904. In the afternoon, I went down to Papa's office. I earned $1. I am going to put my money in the bank as soon as I get $12. June 23rd. In the afternoon, I went to the Metropolitan Theater. The play was The Billionaire. In the evening, I read and counted my marbles. I now have 600. November 26th. In the afternoon, Papa gave me 50 cents. I put $1.10 in the bank. I now have $5.58. Wow!
Getty is faithful to his heroes. As a child, he fell upon the Victorian author of adventure stories for boys, G.A. Henty, and, an unlikely and endearing aspect, these books remain the rosebud of citizen Getty. They're always upon his bedside table and near his desk, stout Victorian volumes with such stirring titles as Winning His Spurs, Bravest of Brave. And often the solitary billionaire retreats into the simple, clean-cut world of Henty.
the masses of Britons poured down to the attack. Then their trumpets sounded and they again advanced, the cavalry in the rear moving forward to join those in the advance. But before they accomplished this, the Britons were upon them. Showers of darts were poured in, and the horsemen, unable to stand the onslaught, rode into the spaces between the companies of the infantry.
Not all of Paul Getty's heroes come from boys' adventure stories. The richest man in the world admires Julius Caesar and Mussolini, Winston Churchill and President Kennedy. But who is there that he could envy?
I've envied many people. I envy people that are younger and stronger and more cheerful than I am.
More cheerful?
People that have better character than I have.
What about the ordinary man in the street? Do you envy the man whose money problems are not too much money, but not enough money?
I think a lot can be said for him. I think that he has many advantages. Large financial responsibilities are not any key to cheerfulness.
You've
There's great virtue in being a small businessman.
There is.
Can be great happiness in it too. Yes. I mean, a successful small businessman.
But small by your standards, Mr. Getty.
Well, no, I'd say what's generally known as small. I mean, a man who has a small business, but is comfortable there. He's got a business worth £100,000 or something like that. He has the best clothes that he can wear. He eats the best food. He travels when he wants to travel. He lives in a comfortable home. He has a comfortable car. He goes to theater whenever he wants to go to theater. And he's not a, he has the blessed boon of anonymity.
I suppose some people might see you as lucky, Mr. Getty, some as a cold, calculating machine, others perhaps as a daring and unique business genius with a Midas touch. How do you see yourself?
Well, I see myself as a, you might say, as a tennis player, just trying to volley the ball back.
But who's serving, Mr. Getty?
Well, I find in my business mail, I get probably 50 letters a day. I'm supposed to make the final decision or express an opinion. I try to keep current with my business mail. Also get maybe 1,000 letters a week. Some weeks 3,000 or 4,000 letters from strangers, you might say, from the general public. Some cranks, crackpots, some very worthy people too. But obviously, if I read 24 hours a day, I wouldn't be able to go through more than a small fraction of it. But my business mail does require an answer, and as I say, I just try to return the ball, so to speak. I remember seeing a desk of President Truman, and he had a little sign on there, and the desk says, "The buck stops here." he couldn't pass the buck. And when you're president of a company, you can't very well pass the buck.
But you have more money than you or your sons or your grandsons could ever conceivably need. Is there any necessity to keep on sending the ball back?
No, but I've never felt particularly inclined to sell out.
But if you sold out for 3,000 million pounds or 3,500 million pounds, it doesn't seem to make much difference, really, when you're in this kind of astronomic figure.
Well, as we said before, business is business. I mean, it's either good business or it's bad business. It's just because it's a high figure doesn't necessarily make it a good sale, does it?
But if you're going to wait until the time of an advantageous sale, you may have to wait 50 years or so.
But if you sell, what are you going to put it in?
Well, you'd lie back and beachcomb, Mr. Getty.
Yes, but you probably have worries then, you know, about your capital, and you wouldn't have the control over it. And I don't know. I think that you might jump from the frying pan into the fire.
I get the feeling, Mr. Getty, that you get far more pleasure out of actively controlling this empire of yours than you ever would lying back on the beach.
Well, I suppose so, although I've always thought that I was quite talented as an idler. If I had the opportunity to idle, I could do pretty well.
In theory, of course, a man's reward is in ratio to his contribution to society, to the value of the work he does.
Yes, it's the services that he renders to society, and not what some people might say the true value of the services, but what the public says is the value of the services.
You see, if your income, as has been calculated, is some £35 million a year, that's £700,000 a week, or about £100,000 a day. What are you doing, Mr. Getty, to deserve all that?
Well, I suppose that the services that I've rendered been mostly in finding oil. Finding oil is not a very easy thing to do. Some people find oil, other people don't.
If you do have this absurd income, how can you spend it? How can you use it? How can you get through it?
Well, in one sense of the word, I don't have it. It's my companies that have it. It's my interest in my companies that has it. It isn't that somebody brings a keg of money every morning at 9 o'clock to the bank, deposits it in the vault there.
But you own 81% of your company, so it's
Yes.
as good as having a cake.
Well, in effect, and if, as, and when I ever sold out, it were possible to sell out, or the company were ever liquidated, then I might have some money. But until that far-off day,
You're struggling on.
I'm struggling on. While I don't complain of hardship, I don't say that I'm worried about whether I have taxi fare or not, or whether I could afford to make a trip to Paris and back. Nevertheless, and I have my personal business too, which is relatively very small compared to my company interest, but I have many times borrowed money from banks in my personal business in order to drill necessary oil wells, and I never had the feeling that I was flush in cash.
Mr. Getty is certainly flush in art. His collection at Sutton Place has just been valued at £1.5 million. But though these paintings decorate his galleries, enrich his sitting rooms, embellish his bedroom, they don't belong to him. They're owned by a company called Art Properties, Inc., a United States corporation, the stock of which, it turns out, is owned 100% by Mr. Getty. The larger part of his art collection's at another home at Santa Monica, California. That collection's a foundation and open to the public. Here at Sutton Place, for his private enjoyment, such riches as Veronese's Lady in Red, Gainsborough's Countess of Chesterfield, Gentileschi's Rest on the Flight. Treasures enough, you'd think, to entrance and enthuse their proud and happy majority stockholder. On top of such artistic delight, there's another satisfaction involved. Diana and her nymphs, this magnificent Rubens, which cost him £130,000 2 years ago, has, like most of his careful investments, satisfactorily appreciated. It's just been valued at 3 times what he paid. St. Bartholomew, the Rembrandt he bought last year, almost accidentally, for £190,000, is today worth double. He has the habit of making the right decisions. He always wins. The charm of the very rich, it's been said, is not their wealth, but the slightly hangdog look they wear. And there's no doubt that Paul Getty takes his life and his pleasures with morose preoccupation and melancholy. His passionate interest in his own business appears joyless. But for him it has the enduring fascination that others find in love or fellowship or in any of those activities to which men have ever thought it worthwhile to devote their lives and themselves. But achievements outside this all-devouring business, would he find more satisfaction, say, in having painted his Rubens than in being a billionaire?
I don't know that I would prefer to be a successful painter rather than a successful businessman. I think that business is, in its way, just as important as painting. I certainly would rather be a good painter than a bad businessman, but if I had my choice of being a good painter or a good businessman, I think I'd be just as well satisfied to be a good businessman.
You said that a man with a lot of money tends to become rather skeptical of people. Have you found yourself becoming more and more suspicious of those around you?
Well, I try not to be suspicious, because I think that's a bad road to travel. One can become so suspicious that one's suspicious of everyone.
Your art dealers tell me that you're the most suspicious man they've ever had to deal with.
I think you could go into a man's house and criticize the man, criticize his wife, criticize his children, and he might still love you like a brother, but if he shows you a picture on the wall and tells you that's a beautiful so-and-so, and you say, well, I don't think it is, I think it's a fake, then you've lost his friendship forever.
Of course, it's been suggested that your Rubens isn't a Rubens, hasn't it? So you've lost 1 or 2 friends that way.
Well, I'm satisfied with it. It's being authenticated by some very good people.
Many people believe that all millionaires live lives of unlimited pleasure and luxury. So this is a belief that could well stimulate feelings, I suppose, of envy and resentment, even of hatred. How have these reactions affected you?
Oh, I think many people do have a wrong idea. However, I think that most millionaires that I've known are very hard-working men, very hard-working indeed. I think that probably of all the classes I know, the millionaire businessman is the hardest working. I would think they work longer hours than any class of workman work.
Many of these millionaires seem to obtain relief from the uneasiness, the initial suspicion and distrust that tends to characterize the rich man's relations with his fellow men by philanthropy, by the wholesale distribution of much of their fortunes. But your benefactions, Mr. Getty, don't appear to be commensurate with the scale of your fortune.
Well, I think that a man is doing a worthy work if he builds up his business. He gives employment to large groups of people and renders service to the public, and the benefits there, I mean, are making a living for thousands of people, protecting them against old age and sickness, and doing it yourself rather than delegating somebody else to do it. I mean, when you give money to a charity may be doing the same thing that you're doing, may not be doing it any better or as well.
I see you said, I never give money to individuals. It is very unrewarding and unscientific. Do you have any philanthropic policy at all?
Yes, that is one of them. Well, I discussed the problem of individual giving with many people. I once discussed it with Mr. Rockefeller, and I understand that his policy is that they cannot help individuals.
In your daily round, Mr. Getty, how much money do you carry on you?
Oh, very little, few pounds. Probably no more than you do or anyone else does.
Do you find that shops and hotels and restaurants expect you to be a big spender?
No, I don't think so. I don't think they do. I hope they don't, because they might be disappointed.
There are a great many stories, Mr. Getty, of your care with money. For example, you've installed a pay telephone box here in Sutton Place to prevent your guests abusing your hospitality by making trunk and toll calls.
Well, I think right-thinking guests would consider that was a benefit. It's rather daunting if you're visiting somewhere and you have to put in a long-distance call and charge your host with it.
It's said, Mr. Getty, that you've waited outside a dog show for the entry fee to come down by 2 or 3 shillings, and that you eat late in restaurants to avoid paying the supplement for the orchestra.
Well, I might have done that occasionally, because after all, that's what a great many people do, what most people do, don't they? And I mean, if it's within reason, if you probably do it yourself, if you know that a certain restaurant that the cover charge is off at 10 o'clock, and it's a substantial cover charge, and you're a large party, and it's 5 minutes to 10. Would you want to go in and spend maybe $10 or $15 in cover charges for the party for the sake of 4 minutes? That'd either be splashing money around, showing off, or else just not being with it, as the saying is.
It's said, Mr. Getty, that you're so with it that you'll wait for a lift to avoid paying for a taxi.
No, I don't wait for a lift. Or if I had to wait 2 or 3 minutes, I certainly would.
You have more money, as I said, than you or your sons or your grandsons or your great-grandsons could ever conceivably need. Surely half an hour of your time is worth more than, say, a 5-shilling taxi fare. Surely you've no reason to accept the slightest inconvenience at any time, even if it is another $10 or $15 on a restaurant bill. What is $10 or $15 to you?
That's true.
It's less than a farthing to anyone
But
else.
don't you think that that's something to do with human nature? Now, my idea of a good place to spend money is right in my own business.
But you're not enjoying that. You're not getting pleasure out of it.
Yes, I do. I like to see a new refinery. I like to see a new chemical plant. I like to see a new tanker. I like to see a new office building. Because it's constructive. In the first place, we hope it's a good investment. It's going to give employment to a lot of people. The tanker's going to employ people probably for the next 25 years. It's going to transport oil products. It's going to benefit humanity by that. We hope it earns a small profit, which ultimately will return the money invested and a low rate of interest.
So it often seems that lesser multimillionaires, less rich people, are able to lead much grander, fuller lives than you.
Well, it's, I went to St. Moritz some years ago, and about the second day there, it was suggested that I give a large party. I said, why? Well, he said, you're a prominent man, and prominent men is more or less custom to give a big party at St. Moritz. And I was told that a certain famous millionaire who happened to be there, that he'd just recently given a party for 80 people. So before I committed myself, I went to see him. And I said, did you give this party? And he said, yes. I said, how many people did you have there? He said, 80. I said, how many of them were friends of yours? You know, he said, about 5. So I said, you had 75 people there you'd never seen before. He said, yes, that's right. So I didn't see the point of giving a party for a lot of people that I didn't know.
However, he has been known to entertain strangers. Once a year, these orphans visit Uncle Paul at Sutton Place, when he has more fun than he did at his housewarming. Though then the expense of entertaining 1,500 guests was shared by the father of a debutant. For such occasional sidelines, and for the mainstream of his life, for the good of a business empire which weighs heavily upon him, Paul Getty exercises his phenomenal concentration every day under the eyes of Renoir's demure young women. For keeping fit is another serious business, and not many 70-year-olds have such a way with barbells. His 2 aging Cadillacs are little used. He measures his walks with a pedometer and the temperature of his daily dips. Mr. Getty is a great tapper of barometers. There are 2 pools at Sutton Place, but not even in the country, where life should be straightforward. Not even this old Tudor mansion can escape the corporate tangle in which Mr. Getty envelops himself, for he doesn't even own his own home. Instead, it's owned by the Sutton Place Property Company Limited, a British company, which itself is owned by an American company, the Pacific Western Oil Corporation, which in turn is owned by the Getty Oil Company, 80% of which is owned, yes indeed, by Mr. Getty. A billionaire who could live luxuriously anywhere in the world, he has disappointingly unsentimental reasons for deciding to live here among us.
Britain is very convenient for me in connection with my business in the Middle East. It isn't actually in the Middle East, and yet it's close to it. It's much more convenient than California is. So I must confess that I didn't come here for the climate.
So this practical American, who was at Oxford half a century ago, slips comfortably into the secure tranquility of English country life as Squire of Sutton Place, one of the finest examples of an unfortified Elizabethan manor house. Or that's what it was. Mr. Getty has had a few changes made. If you feel more secure here, then, Mr. Getty, why all these security precautions here at Sutton Place? The police dogs and the bars and the bodyguards. What is it that you're frightened of?
Oh, I wouldn't say that I'm frightened of anything in particular. Just, I suppose, a necessary precaution.
Against what?
Well, there's no money in the house. A few works of art. I don't think they'd be very saleable.
Why, then, is it a necessary precaution?
Well, there might be crackpots. There are crackpots in England.
What sort of thing could they do there?
Well, they could, what do you suppose crackpot would do? He might come in, dynamite the place?
Have you had any evidence of anything?
No.
I mean, you don't need
you don't need police dogs to keep away begging letters.
No, or crackpot letters. But I have the police dogs mainly because I like them.
Apart from these fears of crackpots, do you have any other private fears? I'm thinking of fire or ghosts or loneliness.
Oh, no, I'm not afraid of ghosts. I think we all fear disease, old age, being helpless.
Millionaires do seem to be heavily handicapped in their search for domestic happiness. Do you have much aptitude or instinct for family life?
I like to think I'm average.
You're not average in as much as you've been married 5 times, Mr. Getty.
Well, maybe business had something to do with that, because I think it's hard for a woman to feel that she's competing with the business. I was a rather conscientious businessman, and an old saying, business before pleasure, and maybe there was too much of it in my marriages.
Certainly your spectacular success as a businessman has only been equaled by what seems to be your abysmal failure as a husband.
That's right. I'm the world's worst at marriage.
I see you've written, I hate being a failure. I hate and regret the failures of my marriages. I would gladly trade my millions for just one lasting marital success. Is this still true today?
Well, I think so, but I don't want to get hundreds of letters from women who want to marry me, sight unseen.
In a Society magazine the other day, you wrote that one of the things that made you happy was being with women, while one of the things that made you unhappy was women leaving you.
Yes.
It seems that
I like the company of women, but I think when a woman wants to leave a man, she generally leaves him.
It does seem that you've always been fairly ruthless in your personal relationships. You've left your wives at the time of the birth of your children to go about your business. Have you always put business first?
Well, not any kind of business, but important business, I suppose I have.
I'm trying to think what could be important, because we're on such a different scale, we have a different scale of values here. What would be important enough to take you away?
Well, when informed decisions have to be quickly made, and you have to study the situation before making a decision.
Would you say that you're a sentimental man, Mr. Getty?
I think so, yes.
One of your wives has said that you're much afraid of showing your feelings. She says you've never been able to open up with men, or indeed have an intimate man friend.
Oh, I think I've had a few good friends among men. One of the closest friends I had, one of the best friends I had, unfortunately died this morning. But I think I had a long and close friendship with him.
She says, Paul is the most lonely man I know. He wants to meet the other person, but he can't.
I wouldn't say that I've ever felt particularly lonely. I've been too busy to feel lonely. You're like the squirrel in the cage. You race to stay where you are.
In this race, what have you had to sacrifice to become such an immense financial success?
Well, I suppose a lot of leisure.
Anything else?
Oh, a lot of things I wanted to do, a lot of trips I would like to have made, and theaters I would like to have seen, and walks I would like to have taken.
Presumably you'd believe the old bromide that money doesn't buy happiness. What else do you find it can't buy?
Well, I don't think it can buy health. I don't think it can buy good time. I think some of the best times I ever had didn't cost me any money.
What sort of times were they?
Oh, down at the beach, on a surfboard, waiting for a big breaker to come in, ride it into shore, not spending any money there. The breakers are free. The sunshine is free.
How do you think your relationship with other people would change if by some catastrophe you lost all your money?
Oh, I hope I'd have 3 or 4 friends left.
You seem to be a melancholy man, Mr. Getty, a man who doesn't make friends easily. Your normal expression is not perhaps a very happy one. In fact, you often look so miserable, people must believe that your money has not brought you much happiness.
Well, I suppose that's the effect, I suppose, of responsibility. I think that ever since my father died, left me the responsibility of the business, that I haven't had quite the buoyant feeling that I had before.
How would you like to be remembered, Mr. Getty?
Well, I think I'd like to be remembered as one who succeeded in retaining the business that I inherited and expanding it to a reasonable proportion. I think if my father came back today and asked me how the business was going, I'd say, well, it's going fairly well.
I think it is going fairly well, Mr. Getty, yes. How do you think that you will be remembered?
Probably as a businessman.
Just a businessman?
I think so. Might be a footnote in history someplace.
So where do you go from here? What is left for the richest man in the world to do?
Well, just keep on with the business.
But you must know, Mr. Getty, that you can't take it with you.
No, it's probably a good thing. It might be quite a burden.
From the burden of wealth, there's no release. With his rare, wintry smile, the richest man in the world is, perhaps fortunately for us all, modest and unassuming. His opinions and reactions may not always commend him to many people, for the world, when so coldly contemplated, seems rather a bleak place. But they're not dangerous opinions. They harm no one, and in their way, they help many. For surely it's better for the non-rich that the solitary billionaire should care more for tankers than for luxury yachts, find his pleasures in refineries, not racecourses. His money, as you've seen, is most carefully spent. In his remote world of employees and strangers, he looks after the millions. The billions look after themselves. So, there goes the richest man in the world. Would you change places with him?